You're just an old-fashioned ATM punch in the right code and it spits out cash. All your life, all you've known how to do is sign your name. Honestly, you're not even half the man, mister. Blackwood is, Emma said, her smile as thin as a blade. Derek stood beside her, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. He didn't have to speak. Emma's lines had been rehearsed. My heart sank, a lead weight added to the burden of my old age. I wanted to ask, if I'm so useless, who paid for your college tuition? Who sold your mother's ring so you wouldn't have to take out a payday loan? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to be flat. All right, if that's the case, starting this month, you and your husband can start paying all of your own bills. The air froze. A silence as long as a decade stretched between us. Emma raised an eyebrow, a faint, cold smile playing on her lips. What bills? Everything you call freedom, I replied. The apartment, the credit cards, your dream trip to Napa. Derek swallowed hard. Emma's voice turned sharp. You dare cut me off now? I'm not cutting you off, I said, standing up. I'm just shutting down the machine you just named. I walked into my small office and returned with a worn leather binder. The rustle of printed statements, contracts, and emails was the only sound and indictment for their 8-month script. I'm guessing 99% of you will get this far. Sigh and just keep scrolling without hitting like or subscribe, even though it only takes a second. What time is it, where you are, and where are you listening from? My left cheek burned. The smell of red wine and vanilla perfume hit me at the same time. Forks and knives froze mid-air. 300 heads turned in unison, a jury that had never met me before. The band stopped right in the middle of a beat. Even the trumpet went silent as if afraid of a misstep. I straightened my back. I didn't raise a hand to my cheek. I didn't flinch. The only sound was the clinking of ice in a glass, small, frozen things that knew how to keep quiet better than people. My daughter, Emma, was still standing across from me, her wedding dress white as seafoam. Her skin glowed under the chandeliers. Her smile was cracked like overfired porcelain. You're embarrassing me, Dad, she said, her voice low but perfectly captured by the microphone. At the head table, my son-in-law, Derek Blackwood, wore a polite smile like a tie that was too tight. It was a delayed smile, the kind worn by a man trying to catch up to his own lie. I heard myself breathe. Short. Even. Applause erupted from somewhere and spread like a wave. A few people stood up. There were long, drawn-out ahs. I understood. They weren't clapping for me. The applause wasn't celebratory. It felt like handcuffs shackling my honor to a story my daughter had just told on my behalf. I listened to the gentle sway of the chandeliers, the rustle of linen tablecloths. Between the crystal and the fabric, something had quietly fractured. Sorry. Someone at the next table mumbled, the kind of apology spoken for show. I scanned the room. People looked at me as if awaiting a confession. I didn't have one. I had paperwork. My name's Robert Mitchell, I said into the microphone, my voice normal, no need to roar. I am 67 years old. 23 years ago, I carried a 5-year-old girl out of a social worker's office. I learned how to braid hair. I learned patience. I learned how to make pancakes that didn't burn. Other tarot. A few people at the table to my left cracked smiles. The tension in the room eased a notch. I continued. And today, I learned one more thing. Silence is also a kind of lie. Emma snatched the microphone from my hand. That's enough, Dad, she seethed, but I didn't fight for it. I just looked directly into her eyes. The years of school runs, the late nights waiting for her to come home, the conversations about her dreams, it all flashed by like a home movie. Then I saw the most recent scene. The talk about the wedding budget not long ago. I'd asked, what should we set for the flowers and the band? She had laughed, waving a dismissive hand. Don't worry, Dad. Derek's family is taking care of everything. That was the first crack, a small fissure in the perfect wall. From that moment on, her laughter was always half a tone too bright, like wallpaper hastily applied over a foundational crack. I glanced at the bar. A $300 bottle of whiskey I'd gifted. Derek was open, its amber glowing under the lights. Earlier in the evening, he had raised a glass to self-made men without even looking in my direction. I noted it, The way I note numbers without comment, just recording the data. Derek now stood up, his arms open as if to embrace the entire room. Everyone, I think there's been a slight misunderstanding. His smile was as smooth as the varnish at a country club. We all know Robert is a generous man. Let's allow this to be a private matter. His voice was gentle, the words wrapped in silk. But between the threads, I saw the fibers of a noose. I brought the microphone back to my lips. I will say one more thing, then I'll be quiet. I turned to the audience. 300 people, waiting. I never promised 30 million. I said it slowly, clearly, without emphasis. A silence as thick as the carpet fell. Someone cleared their throat. The band stirred but didn't dare start. The chandelier seemed to exhale a long, heavy breath. My statement wasn't loud. It was just direct. And I knew, from here on out, the story would require proof. I didn't bring promises. I brought documents. Emma's lips tightened. Her eyes glistened. It was hard to tell if it was from tears or the light. You always do this, she said, just loud enough for me to hear. Always have to be right, your way, you always embarrass me. Then she hugged me a light, empty embrace. A performance for the chandeliers. I led her. I had once taught her how to hug someone so they felt secure. Today, this was different. In the corner of the room, Mrs. Gable, my neighbor from across the street, was pretending to be on a phone call, but the curtain of her lips was parted just enough to watch. I wondered what story she would tell her prayer group tonight. A happy family's misfortune with a cheap father, or a well-rehearsed play. Mr. Mitchell, a man in a charcoal suit with a staff name tag, approached. His voice had the smooth, professional polish of the hotel. Could you step outside for a moment? Just to help the proceedings flow smoothly. I looked at his name tag. I looked past him to James Blackwood, Derek's father, who was now at the podium, pretending to adjust the microphone. Our eyes met for a beat. Some conversations need no words. They were the hosts. I was not. I'll step out, I said, my voice still calm. But before I do, I scanned the room one last time. If any of you want to hear the rest of the story, it's not a speech. It's bank statements, contracts, and a history of how money has spoken for us. Records outlast rumors. Dad, Emma hissed, her mouth smiling at the guests, but her eyes issuing a threat. Don't you dare do this here. I turned back to her. I remember her joke in front of her friends the other day. My dad isn't good at anything, except writing checks. The table had laughed, then fallen silent, the polite kind of silence that spreads like mold. I had pretended not to hear. I thought it was a clumsy joke. It turned out to be a script. The staff member gestured discreetly toward the exit. I followed, each step slow, keeping my shoulders straight. The applause started, again applause for what? I didn't know. Maybe people just clap whenever an awkward situation is swept behind the door. It sounded like handcuffs. I took one last look at the $300 bottle of whiskey. Derek was saying something to the MC. His hand on Emma's shoulder like a prop he'd practiced with too many times. In the lobby, the lights were less harsh. The smell of artificial roses mixed with floor polish. A security guard stood there, his face impassive. We'll escort you to the back exit for your convenience, he said. Thank you, I replied. I felt a very slight tremor in my hand. I clutched the inside pocket of my jacket, where the leather-bound folder lay as thin as a promise, as heavy as a verdict. At the side door, the air was cooler. I saw my reflection in the glass. A gray-haired man, tied straight, a faint flush on his left cheek. I finally touched it. It stung. It felt as if I had just been branded. Silence is a kind of lie. Tonight, I won't teach her that. I rotated my wrist slightly, as if testing the tightness of an invisible cuff. It was fine. I knew how to get it off. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need a crowd. I needed time and documentation. I deal in statements, not statement pieces. Legacy isn't cash. It's control and compliance. And if they thought they had written my lines for me, they were mistaken. I hadn't read their script. In the parking lot, the San Francisco night air swept across, the smell of sea salt mixed with warm asphalt. I sat in my car and looked up at the ceiling for a few seconds. If someone were to ask me what else I wanted to say tonight, I would probably say it quietly, as if into a recorder for playback tomorrow. If anyone's listening, stay tuned, not for the applause, but to see what the paperwork has to say. Then I started the car, the blue dashboard lights coming on like a cat's eyes. I pulled out of the gate, glancing quickly in the mirror. The ballroom lights were still glittering like a fake city in an amusement park. On the way home, I replayed the way Emma had waved my hand away every time I'd asked about the budget during the preparations. Don't worry, Dad, the Blackwoods are covering it. I remember the moment she ran her hand over the marble countertop in their new condo. My retirement bonus transformed into a place for an espresso machine. It's perfect, she sighed. Finally, a space that's ours. I had nodded, being the gracious father I was supposed to be. But tonight, grace wasn't going to save anyone. The truth might. A red light. I stopped. In the rearview mirror, my face was split between the streetlight and the shadow. I whispered to myself, a commitment. Tomorrow, the old coffee shop, the leather folder. I'm not bringing promises. I'm bringing records. And if I needed one final line to anchor myself to the path I had just chosen, it was this, in English, because that's how it came to me. I never promised 30 million. I hit the gas. The night air was cool again. And somewhere deep in my chest, a screw tightened another half turn. The rest will be paperwork, the rest will be time. And I, a 67-year-old man, would not be silent anymore. The coffee shop on the corner of 3rd and Pine wasn't the kind of place you made big decisions. At least, that's what most people would think. It was too small to be formal, too bright to be discreet, and far too full of the hiss of an espresso machine to pass for a negotiating table. But this was a place I had chosen. After 40 years of running Mitchell Industries, I learned one thing. Truth is often easier to swallow when it's served with the aroma of coffee and the clink of a spoon against ceramic. I arrived early, ordered a cappuccino, and placed a worn brown leather folder on the light wood table. Its edges were slightly frayed, much like the papers inside a collection of documents with the power to change the entire trajectory of my daughter's life. I rested my hand on it, then removed it, then placed it back, as if checking my own pulse. Emma texted, stuck at a light. I wasn't surprised. She was always a few minutes late. A small but consistent habit. A quiet insistence on operating just outside of everyone else's schedule. 5 minutes later, she walked in, pulling the morning light through the glass door with her. She wore a sand-colored knit dress, her hair in a loose bun, her loafers pristine white. Her face was bright, her makeup looking like it had been applied in a hurry. She hugged me, a gesture just long enough to appear polite to onlookers, but light enough for me to know it was procedural. Sorry, Dad, she smiled, but her eyes were already scanning the menu on the wall. I only have 40 minutes. Derek's waiting for me at the architect's office. I nodded. I pushed the leather folder toward her. This for you. Emma paused, placing her fingertips on the edge of the folder. She traced the stitching as if touching something that might soil her manicure. I thought you didn't have to make such a big deal of it, she said, her voice attempting a note of playfulness. Your name is in here, I replied, my tone even, right next to mine. I opened the folder, revealing the first page, a share transfer agreement. The next page, a board resolution draft. I'd had Marcus, my lawyer, draft them to be understood even by someone who hated meetings large font, plenty of white space, concise, 45% of Mitchell Industries, I said. I retain 51% until I retire. You won't have to work day to day. You'll receive regular dividends. Dividends are groceries you don't have to beg for. The hiss of the espresso machine cut through the air, sharp as a red pen striking a line through a contract clause. In the corner, a couple pretended to look at their phones, but their heads were tilted slightly in our direction. The barista tapped used coffee grounds into a bin, the rhythm echoing like a small gavel. The coffee shop, with its feigned busyness, had suddenly become a mini tribunal. Emma looked at the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to inconvenience, then to coldness. She pinched the edge of a page between two fingers as if holding an insect. She read a few words, then closed the folder and pushed it gently back toward me. I don't want this. The sentence landed on the table with the sharpness of a knife's edge. I didn't raise an eyebrow. Which part don't you want? The voting rights? The dividends? The succession plan? All of it, she said, her tone neat. I don't want to be tied to the company. It's not for me. I don't want the meetings, the reports, all that business nonsense. I took a slow breath, letting the years rewind. I remember Emma's internship at Mitchell, sitting in the glass-walled conference room, fiddling with her phone, her face growing paler as the 12th slide on operating costs appeared. I remember telling Marcus, don't force it. Let her find another way to learn. I had been gracious, and grace hadn't saved anyone from the consequences. Freedom that someone else pays for isn't freedom, I said, as much a reminder to myself as it was to her. Emma frowned, then spoke quickly. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about a life. I want to travel, to write, to open a small gallery. She stressed the word gallery as if it had been rehearsed. A gallery also has invoices, contracts, and taxes, I said without sarcasm. You want to know where your cash flow comes from. And dividends are silent cash flow. And I don't want it. She looked at me directly, the second time, clearer now. That was a cut. The spoon in my cappuccino cup vibrated, emitting a tiny clink that seemed to echo. I nodded. All right. Not everyone wants to be in the engine room. I closed the leather folder, securing the clasp. So what do you want? This question, in this coffee shop, has saved us at many crossroads. College, her first Honda Civic, the internship in Seattle. She used to have answers. This time, Emma leaned back, exhaled softly, and then smiled. It was the kind of smile you use to unlock a car with a remote, a pre-planned action. If you really want to help us, a cash wedding gift would be more meaningful than stock. The steam one hissed again, long and cold. I didn't move. How much? You're being dramatic, she laughed, her voice a little too high, the sound of paper covering a crack. Don't ask it like you're writing a budget. Oh wait, Emma, I said. At this table, we've always used numbers. College, the car, the internship. We never let ambiguity do the talking. She hesitated. Then her fingers tapped lightly on the table and her eyes lit up, like someone who had just decided to order the most expensive item on the menu. 30 million. The two words fell clear and cold. My heart rate didn't change. I heard the ceiling fan whirring. I heard an old dog sniff at its owner's feet by the door. I looked at Emma, at her hand resting on the table, the engagement ring shining coldly under the lights. 30 million, I repeated. Do you have any idea that's 3/4 of the company's current valuation? Do you know that I'm almost 70 and still have my own bills to pay? People help their kids get started, she said quickly, then softened her tone as if to cushion the blow. I'm not asking for a monthly allowance, just once, then we'll be on our own. And on your own with my money, I corrected. You call that freedom? She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. I don't want to live in your shadow, Dad. I want my own life. I was silent. In my mind, a fragment of a thought sparked. If she didn't hold the shares, someone else would hold the script for her. Derek? The Blackwoods? I didn't say it out loud. Emma pushed the folder toward me one more time, this time with finality. I don't want the shares. I want to start my life, my way. As also, I took the folder back and fastened the clasp. So, you've named your number. The coffee shop was once again filled with the sounds of spoons against ceramic. The espresso steam hung in the air like an invisible ink. I looked at my daughter, saw the determination in her face, and realized I was facing not just Emma, but an entirely different value system, lifestyle versus legacy. And in that moment, I knew a fracture had opened. It was small, but it was deep enough to swallow every ounce of grace I had ever extended. The number landed on the wooden table of the coffee shop like a brick dropped into still water. 30 million, Emma said, her voice flat, steady, as if she were ordering from a menu. I sat motionless. The espresso machine took a long, hissing breath and then exhaled steam, like an old boat being tightened. The smell of burnt coffee hung in the air, but my throat was as dry as paper. You've just asked for 3/4 of everything I own, I said slowly, measuring each word. She smiled, the kind of polite banquet hall smile one wears like wallpaper to cover a foundational crack. You're being so dramatic, Dad, she said, tilting her head. I'm not asking. I'm asking you to help us get started. She emphasized the word help like a comforting hand on the shoulder, but in her eyes, I saw only a demand. I took a deep breath. Dividends, I said, my voice as steady as if I were reading a financial report. Roughly $2 million a year. Consistently, that's oxygen, not champagne. You could live, learn, travel, even open that gallery you mentioned, without tearing down the house. I looked at her directly. 3/4 of my net worth isn't a gift. It's a demolition. Emma rested her chin on her hand, adopting the posture of someone enduring a tedious lecture. She smiled, then whispered, "You're almost 70, Dad." The line wasn't delivered with concern. It was an hourglass being flipped, the sand trickling quickly into someone else's pocket. I let the silence hang for a moment. People say, "You're almost 70, Dad," when they want the wallet to spring open, I said. But at 70, the bills don't stop knocking. Outside the window, people walk their dogs, nodding to each other. Inside, the couple in the corner pretended not to listen, but the silence they created was louder than the coffee grinder. Polite silence always spreads like mold, barely visible at first, then it covers the entire room. "You sound like a lawyer," Emma pouted. "Good," I replied, "because this afternoon I'm meeting with one. Marcus Webb, my lawyer for 15 years, was a man of precise build and metronomic speed. His office overlooked a parking lot with perfectly straight lines and maple trees planted in a neat row, a mirror of his own stable approach. "I have to be clear," Marcus said, pen in hand. "Did you, at any point, promise the $30 million figure?" "Absolutely not," I said. "I offered 45% of the company." She refused. "Now she wants cash." Marcus nodded, making a note. "When cash is urgent, Dad is usually lurking nearby. If they mention the Napa estate, I hear the word flip." "Did you bring up Derek's trust?" "I did," I said. "It doesn't open until he's 35. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his lips pursed. "Trust funds lock at 35. Panic knocks earlier. My advice, if you give them 30 million, you'll be broke in 5 years." I was quiet for a moment. I had no intention of signing anything, but I needed to understand why this was exploding now. "You could ask your sister," Marcus suggested. "An outsider can often smell trouble faster." Helen, my sister, called back that evening from Oregon. I could hear the sizzle of oil in the pan. "Listen, Rob," she said. "A girl doesn't just dream up a number like that over coffee. Someone fed her that line. Someone coached her." "My thoughts exactly," I said. She spoke like she was reading from a script. No stumbles, no misplaced commas. Helen was silent for a few seconds. "I met Derek twice. Country club handsome, with a smile that dies after 2 seconds. His eyes never smile. The kind of guy who loves to talk about independence while holding out his hand for someone else's money. I remember Derek's slick smile at the engagement party. Remember the $300 bottle of whiskey he'd opened without even looking at me." "She says she doesn't want to live in my shadow," I recounted. Helen sighed. "That sounds more like a self-help book than her own voice." "Rob, don't let her turn you into an ATM with feelings. It's not your fault she doesn't like board meetings." For the next 2 weeks, my phone became a gavel, marking time. 9:02 del mattino. Emma called. "Have you reconsidered?" 12:17 p.m. text. "Derek found the perfect state. We have to move fast." 8:41 p.m. I just want a warm start for us. There were no calls to ask how I was, not a single mention of my health, my work, or how her mother used to love the color navy blue. Just 30 million, tapping against my days like a nail being hammered into a board. I noticed the shift in language. On day 1, she said, "Help me." By day 3, it was "help us." By day 7, "our family." And by day 10, "my entitlement." It sounded like someone was feeding her legal keywords. Once I cut her off. "You are entitled to nothing, Emma. You have what I choose to give you. And I chose 45% of the company. You refused." I wasn't lecturing. I was just stating the timeline. On the 10th night, she sent a link to a Napa estate. Blue sky, straight rows of vines, a white house, a quaint cottage. "This is it," she texted. "If we miss this, the opportunity is gone." They wanted the vineyard. I heard a vacuum cleaner. When cash is urgent, debt is usually lurking. I wrote 4 words in my notebook. Flip in 6 months? In between, Emma's calls were Derek's velvet glove calls. "Mr. Mitchell," he'd say, his voice perfectly warm. I know this is a big decision, but opportunities in Napa don't wait. He used the word opportunity, the way one uses a silk cloth to cover a fire alarm. One evening, he opened the whiskey I'd given him, live streaming with friends and raising a glass. To self-made men. I saw the clip on the story of one of Emma's friends. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the camera. And I knew who the real audience was. On the 14th day, I called Emma. I need to see Derek. Alone. Maybe AMI. She hesitated for half a second, then agreed. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow. After, Derek will talk to you on the terrace. I hung up and sat in the dark living room, the lamplight pulling on the old rug. I thought of her line, "You're almost 70, spoken like a verdict. But 70, I thought, isn't the sunset. It's just half time. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 lines for myself. I will not sell the roof over my head. I will keep the lights on. I will not preach. I will speak of consequences. I will ask, why now? The trust is locked until 35. Panic knocks sooner. I closed the book. Tomorrow, it would be the club terrace, the night breeze, the whisper of the golf course sprinklers, and a smile as slick as varnish. And I, a 67-year-old man, wasn't coming to bow. I was coming to look the man who put a script in my daughter's mouth right in the eye. They thought the fight was about a vacation home. They were wrong. The real issue was a signature I would never place on their bottom line. The church ceremony was over, but its echo lingered in my heart like a bell that had yet to fall silent. The image of Emma walking down the aisle in her white dress was still seared into my mind. Her face radiant, her eyes shining as if every dream had just come true. I sat in the front pew, keeping my spine straight, my hands steady on my knees. A father, on such occasions, has only one job, to be the foundation. And for 23 years, I had been the foundation, but I didn't know that tonight, I was being recast as a pillar for a different kind of production. The wedding reception spilled into the Fairmont Hotel's ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung like crowns from the ceiling, their light reflecting off tables draped in pristine white linen, off rows of upright crystal glasses, and off the soft notes of a live jazz trio. The space was too perfect enough to hide any cracks. The cocktail hour was over. People were eating and laughing, trading the usual scripted stories. How long have you known the happy couple? I guess we'll be seeing you in Napa? Napa. The name had been a recurring refrain for weeks. I heard it and felt a hollowing inside me. Then came the speeches. The best man told a boisterous story about Derek in college. The maid of honor shed a tear, recounting how Emma once told her, "You are the sister I never had." The laughter and applause were polite and evenly spaced. I sat and waited, knowing the main act was coming. Emma stood up. Her white dress rippled with the movement. She held the microphone with a steady hand, her smile brilliant. "I want to thank all of you for being here," she said, her voice warm and sure, as if she had rehearsed the line dozens of times. I saw Derek's hand briefly touch the small of her back, a gesture as subtle as a prompter's cue. "Derek and I are about to start a new journey in Napa," Emma continued. "A very special place. Oak Ridge, a house on a hill, with rows of vines, a main house, 2 guest cottages, and a small pond by a line of cypress trees." A murmur went through the room. Guests widened their eyes, nodding and whispering, "How wonderful. A dream come true." I sat up straighter, my hand tightening on the edge of the tablecloth. Oak Ridge, the name was like a staple gun firing next to my ear. Emma took a breath. Then she turned to me, her eyes glistening. "And we're able to do this because of my father, Robert Mitchell, who so generously provided the down payment for our new home." Thunderclap applause. The sound erupted, spread, ricocheted off the crystal ceiling, and rained down like hail. Applause rose like a tide and pinned me to the shore. I sat there, my smile frozen. Each clap was another link in the chain, shackling me to the story she had just constructed. Applause as handcuffs. 300 people, none of whom knew the truth, had just ratified her words as a contract in a single, unified clap. I saw Victoria press a hand to her chest and exhale, "Oh, how wonderful." James nodded, his smile full of satisfaction. Derek raised his glass to me, mouthing, Thank you, sir, a tribute perfectly angled for the cameras. Only one thought ran through my mind. If a promise needs a crowd, it isn't a promise. Emma set the microphone down and took her seat. I leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, Emma, I never agreed to that. She kept smiling, her lips trembling slightly, but her eyes bright with defiance. Now you have to. The words clicked in my ear like a lock snapping shut. I could hear the chandeliers hum softly, like complicit witnesses. I looked out at the crowd, radiant faces, hands red from clapping. I started counting in my head, 1, 2, 3. Each beat an unwitting signature on the contract Emma had just read aloud for me. The MC took the mic back, making a cheerful remark to bridge the moment. The laughter returned, the wine was poured again. But I knew that if I sat there, the truth would be buried under the weight of this applause. If I keep quiet, I lose the truth. If I speak, she loses face. The truth will serve us both, eventually. I set my glass down and stood up. The scrape of my chair against the floor was a small sound, but it was enough to turn a few heads. I held up a hand, signaling for the microphone. James gave a slight nod. He probably thought I was going to add fuel to the fire of gratitude. I took the microphone, my heart beating steadily. Thank you, everyone, I began, my voice warm and calm. This is a beautiful day. I paused for half a beat. My daughter is beautiful. A soft awe went through the room. Smiles widened. I gave them what they wanted for a moment. Then came the cut. I did not promise a down payment for any house. Pause. The air went out of the room like a receding wave. I continued, sentence by clear sentence, using a simple formula. Fact. Pause. Fact. I offered my daughter a 45% stake in Mitchell Industries. Pause. She refused it. Pause. I made no commitment of cash. The laughter died. Someone coughed. A young guest lowered his phone. Silence spread, polite as mold. I added one final statement. A down payment isn't destiny. It's a debt starter. I handed the microphone back, sat down, and picked up my water glass. The smells of candle wax, artificial roses, and roasted beef mingled in the air, the scent of a union I will never forget. Emma turned to me, whispering through a clenched smile, "You just humiliated me." I replied in the same low tone, "I just saved the truth, and the truth will serve us both, just not tonight." Another king and the verbal amazement are mice. Derek slid his arm around Emma's shoulder, pulling her close, framing them as a resilient couple against the storm. James stepped up to the microphone, his laugh thick as wood. "Just a little misunderstanding, folks. Let's drink to love." The applause returned weaker this time, more reluctant, but applause nonetheless. Another layer of handcuffs laid over the first. I sat tall. In my mind, the documents scrolled past like a background score. The share transfer agreement, the schedule of dividends, the board resolution. I remember Marcus's words, "You'll be broke in 5 years if you do this." I remember Helen's, "Don't turn yourself into an ATM with feelings." I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the tablecloth's edge, my grip firm. If I was silent, I lost the truth. If I spoke, she lost face. I had made my choice, and I knew the real battle had only just begun. Emma shot to her feet. Her glass clinked against the table. Her smile was plastered on like a mask, but her eyes were burning. The ballroom tilted its collective head, waiting for the next sound. The last round of applause had been meant to bind my hands. But every lock has a key, and I, a 67-year-old man, had made a career of holding onto the keys longer than anyone else. The microphone felt hot in my hand, its feedback a thin, surgical whine. I adjusted the distance, looking straight at the chandeliers that hung like a silent jury. No apology, no preamble. I did not promise a down payment for any house. A pause. 0.4 of a second, just long enough for the room to register the drop in temperature. The sound in the ballroom fell as if someone had pulled a plug. People held their breath, wine glasses suspended in midair. Even the ice in the glasses sounded guilty, clinking softly as if in confession. I kept my voice flat. I offered a 45% stake in Mitchell Industries. My daughter refused it. I made no commitment of cash. Fact. Pause. Fact. No volume. Only verifiable. I placed the microphone back in its stand. The rubber of the clip scraped against the metal stem. making a small, distinct squeak. I turned to go back to my seat. Emma shot up like a spring. The wedding smile was still plastered on her face, but her eyes were incendiary. I had just enough time to see her hands swing up the white lines of tendons visible under her skin before the crack. The sound split the room in two. It wasn't a movie slap, softened by sound effects. It was the blunt, efficient, undeniable sound of skin hitting skin. My left cheek felt like it had been scoured with salt. I blinked once. Her palm stung. My point stood. The verdict was already sealed in my mind. A lie in public needs a truth in public. "You selfish bastard," Emma hissed. And because the mic wasn't fully off, the words stretched into a thin shriek through the speakers. "You always have to be in control. You humiliated me at my own wedding." The atmosphere tore open. Some guests gasped. Others stared intently at the hotel-crested dinner napkins as if they were discreet witnesses. I heard the floorboards groan under shifting feet. In that moment, I just stood there. I didn't raise a hand to my cheek. No defensive reflex. I just stood. Derek lunged forward, one arm wrapping around Emma's shoulders, the other held out as if to block the view. "Honey, private, please," he whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "Let's handle this privately." Privately, after a microphone had just amplified everything tenfold. I looked at him, then at the crowd, at the eyes that had already chosen their size. The smiles had vanished like ash in water. At the head table, James Blackwood snapped his fingers twice. The Blackwood family smoothing machine whirred to life, a well-rehearsed drill. The MC hurried to another microphone. Just a small misunderstanding, folks. The band took its cue, raising a thin layer of jazz to patch the crack. Victoria leaned over, forcing a reassuring smile onto a nearby guest. Compliments slick as club varnish had become soothing slick as club varnish. Emma was still trembling. "You don't love me," she spat, the final consonant sharp as a blade scraping porcelain. "You love your company." "I love the truth," I replied, my voice low, "and the truth will save us both, just not tonight." I turned half a step, intending to return to my chair. Two security guards appeared as if they'd been waiting in the wings. Black suits, discreet earpieces, polished shoes. They were unhurried but absolute. Security walked like punctuation at the end of her sentence. "Sir," the taller one said quietly, his politeness perfectly rehearsed, "we've been asked to escort you outside for some air." The word air was wrapped in velvet. I glanced at the name tag pinned to his breast pocket. Host clause flashed in my mind. The event contract was in the name of Blackwood Hospitality LLC. Section 7.2. The host may request the removal of any guest to ensure the smooth conduct of the event. I'd read contracts like this my entire life. Neat, efficient, incident report, host clause, right to remove, all very neat. Neat isn't true. "I can walk," I said, my voice steady. Before leaving, I went back to my table, picked up the embroidered napkin, and placed it neatly to the side, as if closing a file. I didn't need theatrics. The jazz continued its work of covering the real silence, the silence of people wondering what exactly they had just applauded. I walked, flanked by security, like two parentheses closing out a sentence that had gone on too long. "Robert," James called after me, his voice booming like solid wood. He didn't touch me. He touched the microphone. "Not to worry, everyone," he laughed. "A practiced firefighter, just a little misunderstanding." The three words rolled through the speakers like marbles on glass, smooth, leaving no trace. I didn't answer. The guard opened the double doors. The air in the lobby was cool as honed metal. The hallway was carpeted and thick, a ceiling-mounted camera blinking its red light. I glanced up, meeting its gaze like that of a silent ally. They removed me from the room, not from the record. You can escort a man out. You can't escort the CCTV. At the end of the hall was the concierge desk. A small bell sat on the brass stand. I paused for half a beat, inhaled, and then ting-tapped it lightly. The concierge looked up, her professional smile clicking into place. "I need the event manager," I said quietly, "and a standard hotel incident report." The words landed like legal depositions. The guards looked at each other, a flicker of confusion. They were used to escorting people out, not to watching them file paperwork. "Sir," Perhaps. I'll wait, I said politely. Right here. I leaned against the edge of the desk, not touching the glossy travel magazines. I didn't give them speeches. I gave them forms. 5 minutes. Enough time for the sting in my cheek to fade, for my heart rate to return to a steady office rhythm. The event manager arrived, tie-tight, a sheen of sweat on his temples. Is there a problem, Mr. Mitchell? I was just removed from the ballroom at the host's request, I said, my tone soft but precise. I need you to file an incident report noting the time, the requesting party, and the reason. I read the time slowly from the wall clock, 8:57 p.m. I pointed to the camera in the ceiling. Please note that CCTV footage from 8:52 to 9:05 should be appended if requested. I offered my business card. Send a scan to this email. The Michelin.com domain carried the weight I needed. The manager nodded repeatedly. Yes, of course, sir. Will. He looked at the guards. Log it. I signed my name, a neat, practiced stroke. The pen tip made a small, definitive tab against the paper. Records outlast rumors. I kept a photo of the report on my phone, soft proof of a hard fact. Business concluded. I walked to the hotel exit. The San Francisco night air was just cool enough to be clarifying. I leaned against a stone pillar and checked my incoming calls. 12 from Helen, unanswered. 3 texts from Marcus. I opened my lawyer's messages. Update received. Say nothing more. Remain calm. I'm filing a motion to eat. A second text. Do not contact Emma tonight. A third. I need a list of witnesses, seating positions, and who touched the mic after you. Thanks. I replied with a single line. Incident report filed 8:57 p.m. hallway camera. Call tomorrow. Sent. I added nothing else. Cool. Precise. No volume. Only verifiable. The revolving door behind me spun with a crisp whir. The same security guard from earlier stepped out. His expression recalibrated. Sir, we apologize for the inconvenience. I'm not inconvenienced, I said. I have a report. And I smiled for the first time that evening. A smile that wasn't a prop. A black SUV pulled up. James got out the master of the guest list, bringing the smell of polished wood with him. He shoved his hands in his pockets and approached, his club-varnished smile buffed to a high sheen. Robert, he said, you know venue control is with our family tonight. I had to keep the program running smoothly. Venue control isn't moral authority, James. I replied evenly. You can run the program. I'll keep the truth. He took a shallow breath, his smile slipping a degree. We're adults here. Don't make this harder on Emma. A lie in public needs a truth in public. I repeated the only sentence of the evening worth saying twice. If you want to talk about hard, talk to the person who turned a thank you speech into an invoice. James took his hands out of his pockets, his voice dropping. Tomorrow, this will all be over. No, I said. Tomorrow, it will all be on record. I felt the edge of a business card in my wallet, its heavy stock like a notary seal, and neat isn't the same as true. The SUV pulled away. I took out my phone and opened my notes app. 8:51 p.m. Emma takes mic, announces Oak Ridge, Maine, Pewdwood Cottages. 8:54 p.m. Loud applause. Derek mouth, thank you, sir. 8:56 p.m. I make 3-point correction. Equity divided by decline divided by no cash. 8:56, 8:57 p.m. Slap puddle. 8:57 p.m. Security approaches. Host removal. At table. Victoria right of James freezes 2 sec. Looks at glass. MC takes cue from James. Finger snap. Band volume increases. I added another line. Embroidered napkin equals frame of reference. The small details, the shards ping the timeline to the body of the room. I replay the scene in my head, again constructing the timeline. The chandeliers, the microphone, the slab, the 2 guards, the doors. I didn't hear my own heartbeat. I heard the system, the camera, the report, the contract, the company names, the signatories. The battle had moved to a new forum, no longer about who told the better story, but about who kept the better record. I texted Marcus one more line. Request a litigation hold letter be sent to Blackwood Hospitality plus Fairmont CCTV, audio board feed, stage mic channels 1-2, ballroom cam. Sent The reply was instant. Drafting now. Sent 8 a.m. sharp. Good, I typed. The revolving door opened again. Victoria emerged, the lobby light blurring the edges of what might have been tears or just highlighter. She stopped 2 feet from me. Robert, I'm sorry for all of this. Emma, she's emotional. That's an efficient word, I said, not unkindly. Tonight, everything was emotional. Tomorrow, she started, her hand lifting then falling. The family will handle this. Tomorrow, I corrected, the law will handle this. I gave a polite nod. She turned and walked away, her shoulders looking as if she'd just shrugged off a heavy coat. I looked through the glass into the ballroom one last time. The MC was telling another joke, the guests were laughing cautiously, the music playing on like a respirator. In the golden light, the place card still directed every smile to its proper seat. No one seemed to notice my empty chair. Good. An empty chair shows who left. The report shows why. I touched my cheek. The sting had faded to a dull warmth. No blood, just skin. I pursed my lips, a reminder. Her palm stung, my point stood. I left the hotel. The street smelled of the salty bay. The red lights on the distant bridge blinked like punctuation. In my pocket, my business card rested against the photo of the report, small papers, short signatures. It was enough, I thought. They removed me from the room, not from the record. Tomorrow, I would reclaim the narrative, not with a speech, but with forms. On the drive home, my car passed a gas station, its LED price sign flickering. I counted them off in my head. Entrance camera, hallway camera, ballroom camera, audio console board feed, isolated microphone channels. You can escort a man out, you can't escort the cameras. I flicked on my turn signal. The weapons had changed. They had applause. I had timestamps. And when the noise fades, the last thing standing will be the record. 3 days after the wedding, the phone rang at 9:11 a.m. I was standing at the sink, my hands still smelling of lemon soap. The screen read, Emma, I'm here. Her voice was as flat as an auto-reply email. Dad, I've spoken to a lawyer about my inheritance rights. The word estate echoed in my ear, cold. She spoke of my death like pending revenue. Good, I replied. Which lawyer? That's not important, she said. What's important is that, legally, I'm your heir. You shouldn't take any action that could jeopardize my inheritance. What, specifically, do you want? A clear plan, she said, inhaling, and an advance for us to get settled. Inheritance isn't a line of credit, I said. A beat of silence. Can you meet me? She asked. The usual place. The shop on the corner of 3rd and Pine. Low volume indie music. Light cut across the window, splitting our table into 2 halves. One warm, one cool. The barista glanced up when I ordered my cappuccino. His eyes flickered at the word estate. Everyone hears that word. Emma arrived on time. Cream-colored blazer dress, small pearl earrings, her hair in a low ponytail. The hug was perfunctory. Her hands were cold. I want to start over, she said, sitting down, placing her phone face down on the table. After that night, good, I said. Let's start with the truth. She inhaled, her chin lifting half a degree, a rehearsed posture. I've consulted someone, she began, and I have legal rights to your estate. I just want to secure my future and our families. Her fingers drummed the lawyer's rhythm she didn't own. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps. Scripted. I nodded. Let's stick to what's verifiable. I set my spoon on a saucer. 3 short questions. She leaned back, wary. Who first used the phrase, legal rights you, or someone else? My lawyer, she answered too quickly. His name? Silence. A short beat. A friend of Derek's recommended him. His name? I repeated. I don't remember. In the corner, a middle-aged couple looked at each other. The couple in the corner took notes with their eyebrows. When did you come up with the idea to make the announcement public? I asked. It was my idea. When did you think of it? Last week, she said, her eyes shifting to the window, close to the wedding. Why make it public? Because I was proud, she answered, her smile thin. And because I wanted to build trust. Trust requires documentation, I said. If a promise needs a crowd, it isn't a promise. She exhaled sharply. You're always like this, she said, her voice tight. I don't want shares. I want a life. I'm asking about the timing, I said. Last week. Why last week? Her eyes darted around, her fingers tapping faster. It felt like the right time. I placed a clean paper napkin in front of her, setting it down with precision, a way of closing a beat. Timelines reconcile, stories don't. What happened with the Blackwoods last week? She looked at me, her lips tight. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking questions. I corrected. Socratic, who told you that? When? Why make it public? One beat? Two? Three? Derek mentioned the temporary cash flow issue. How temporary? A few months. How many is a few? 3, 4, she said, her gaze fixed on the space between my shoulders, a point of evasion. And when does Derek's trust open? 35, she said quietly. How old is Derek today? 28, she said, even more quietly. The barista pulled the steam wand. The hiss underscored her last words. You said you thought of the public thank you last week. I tilted my head. Was last week also when Blackwood Hospitality submitted a new filing? I don't know, Emma replied. Defensive. I don't read their filings. I nodded. No victory, no defeat. If you don't know, who stood to gain if I hadn't made my correction? She looked down at her hands. Not you. Correct. I let the silence hang. If not you, then who? She shrugged. Don't make me a tool. I'm not calling you a tool, I said. I'm saying the script had a writer. She looked up, her eyes wet. Do you think I'm lying? I think you're believing a story someone else built. Behind us, the glass door opened. The wind brought the salt smell of the bay. I took a sip of my lukewarm cappuccino. The foam had collapsed, leaving a clear bitterness. What do you want now? I asked, giving her the chance to state her objective. An advance so we can get settled at Oak Ridge, she said, the words more honest than her last. The rest is up to you. An advance based on what? Your estate rights? Yes. Estate rights are not advance withdrawals, I repeated. But I'm your daughter, she said, her voice suddenly childlike. I'm afraid that if you change your mind one day, I'll have nothing. That one landed somewhere soft. I kept my voice even. If you're afraid of having nothing, don't build your life on someone else's debt. The dividends, $2 million a year, that's oxygen. The house in Napa is a bottle of champagne opened at the wrong time. A wry smile touched her lips. There you go again with the lectures. I'm not lecturing, I said. I'm auditing. I decided to audit the story. She was quiet, looking outside. A bus rolled past, its windows reflecting blurred figures. The couple in the corner huddled closer. Even her friends found their shoes suddenly fascinating. I need to verify, I concluded. My tone clipped. Verify what? The timeline. When the idea of a public announcement originated. The source. Who advised you? The benefit. Who gained what if I remained silent? And the crisis. Which days the Blackwoods were in need of cash. Are you going to hire someone? Her voice was small. I'm going to run the numbers, I said. It's what I've done my entire life. Due diligence. Quiet, please. She turned back to me, looking tired. Derek loves me, she said, as if to salvage something soft. Perhaps, I said, but love and a script are not mutually exclusive. So, what do you want from me? The lawyer's name, I said. The name of the person who recommended him. The email you used for correspondence, and your recent call logs. She hesitated. I'll find them. Good, I said. Send it all to my work email. No text, no calls. The barista brought over more water. Emma nodded her thanks and took a small sip. Do you think this can be fixed? I don't fix things with applause, Emma, I said, my voice softening half a notch. I fix them with paperwork. She traced the rim of her cup. I'm sorry I slapped you. Her palm stung. My point stood, I thought, but all I said was, everyone was emotional that night. She nodded and put her phone in her purse. I have to go. I'll send the details. I'll be waiting, I said. You have 24 hours. End matter. She stood, and the hug was lighter this time, less perfunctory. Dad, She hesitated. Don't hate me. I don't hate you, I said. I'm auditing the story. Emma left. The glass door swung shut. The breeze died. I sat for 5 more minutes, listening to the clink of spoons on ceramic, watching the light fall diagonally across the table. The shards were all their small, sharp pieces. The finger-tapping rhythm, the word estate. Last week, a friend of Derek's. Temporary cash flow. Trust opens at 35. It was enough to draw a timeline. I opened my phone and sent a short email to Marcus. Subject, timeline plus E. Mitchell Council. Need verification on 1. Blackwood hospitality filings, last 30 days. 2. Which local attorneys specializing estate rights? 3. EM. Call logs previous week. 4. Status of Napa property. Oak Ridge title. Liens. Pending offers. Sent. I added a note to myself. If she can't name who advised her, I can. I left the cafe. The sky was a milky gray, the wind carrying salt. In my pocket was a small paper receipt, a document signaling that the next chapter will be told in the only language I trust, the language of proof. I don't race against rumors. I lock them to a date and time. And when timelines reconcile, a story has nowhere left to hide. I'm guessing 99% of you will get this far. Sigh and just keep scrolling without hitting. Like or subscribe, even though it only takes a second. What time is it where you are and where are you listening from? I once believed honor was something that couldn't be forged, that it was etched into the way a person lived, not in the numbers printed on a page. But a PDF file with its faint seal and a skewed signature taught me another lesson. Honor, too, could be forged, at least on the surface. That morning, after the cold coffee shop conversation, I sat before my computer screen. The documents were laid out like a deck of cards that someone had stacked against me. I opened each file, like an architect carefully dismantling a house that had begun to show cracks in its foundation. First was the bankruptcy filing for Blackwood Hospitality, submitted to the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, case number 23 to 10894. The total debt appeared as a chilling figure, $47, $2 million. Loans, unpaid contracts, outstanding employee wages, it was all piled up like a mountain. Emma could never have imagined. I zoomed in on the word liabilities, $47,200,000, and let it fill the screen. That number explained why Derek and James had been desperate enough to stage a drama at my daughter's wedding. The next file was an email thread. The subject line was dry. LOI, Oak Ridge Estate. The sender was Derek, the recipient was a Napa real estate brokerage, and attached was a PDF, proof of funds, RM, PDF. I read the body of the email slowly. Funds to be provided via RM. My initials in capital letters. I had never signed, never agreed, but in the recipient's eyes, the money for the winery was to be provided via Robert Mitchell. Before I could process that, I opened the credit card statement. The number $99,830 appeared like a gash. The transaction description, Aurelia Travel, honeymoon package. The billing account was again in my name. An email address, rm_admin@mitchellin.com, had been created to confirm the invoice. An address that had never existed at my company. The transaction date coincided with Emma and Derek's honeymoon. I looked at the number and saw only one truth. My name had been used to pay for a trip I never approved. The deception became even clearer with the draft Napa contract. PSA, draft, Oak Ridge, we too. PDF included the proof of funds, a clumsily edited bank letter, the branch manager's signature missing its middle initial. I examined every detail, the misaligned font, the uneven margins. It all reeked of deceit. I whispered to myself, when proof of funds requires Adobe Illustrator, it ceases to be proof. It becomes intent. I called Emma to the house. When she sat in front of the screen, I didn't begin with accusations. I simply let the documents appear, one by one. This is the bankruptcy filing, I said, pointing to the $47.2 million debt. This isn't a temporary setback. This is an abyss. Emma was silent, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, I didn't know. I switched to the LOI email. Here, they wrote that the funds would come via RM. That's me. Emma put her head in her hands. I never saw that. I pulled up the credit card statement. The honeymoon almost $100,000. Billed to me. She stared at the number, her hand covering her mouth. Derek said, they booked it through the company account to get a corporate rate. I nodded, my gaze still cold. That account was in my name. No one had the right to use it. Finally, I showed her the Napa contract with forged proof of funds. I took out an old check with my real signature and held it next to the screen. Look, see how I formed the lettering? Here, they missed the loop. It was forged by someone in a hurry. Gree, Emma's head fell to the desk. Tears streamed down her face. I was so stupid. I placed a hand on her shoulder, then pulled it back. Not stupid, targeted. And now we correct it with the truth. I opened the browser window to ic3.gov, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. I filled out the form concisely and clearly. Instant 1. Unauthorized credit card charge, $99,830. Instant 2. Forged proof of funds in PSA. Incident 3. Email threats using RM as funding source. I entered Derek's and James's names as suspected parties and attached the list of documents. I explained to Emma, no one gets arrested immediately. The process is to report, review, and then investigate. But this is a legal way to drag the truth into the light. Emma took a deep breath, then opened her phone. I have the password to the wedding email account and to the Z drive Derek sent me links to. Do you want them? I looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure? She nodded. I choose the truth. We logged into the email account. There, in one of the threads, was a line from Derek. Need to close before 9/30. If RM box, we can leverage public goodwill. I read it again and again. Leverage public goodwill. That was the script for the reception, where applause was forged into handcuffs of honor. I sat still for a few seconds, then whispered, they thought this fight was about a vineyard. They were wrong. It was about a signature I was withholding, and that Emma was crying, but these were not the tears of a child caught in a lie. They were the tears of someone who had just realized she was a pawn in a much larger game. She opened the account activity log next, pointing to a strange login from a Napa IP address at 11:41 p.m., right after the wedding. I saved it, making a note, account log IP Napa 11:41 p.m. aligns with forged billing. I printed out the 3 most critical documents and placed them in front of Emma. Let them read what the judge will read. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely a breath. Now, we submit everything. The IC3 complaint is filed. I'm sending the full dossier to the FBI's financial crime section. Your job is to provide everything you have. No deleting, no conversations. When Derek calls, you say only this. My lawyer has advised me not to speak. Emma nodded. She gave me the passwords, even the backup files. As she read out the strings of characters, the trembling in her hands subsided. I took screenshots, built a spreadsheet, and named each file with precision. The scattered pieces were now organized, no longer a chaotic pile of debris. Before she left, she hugged me. This one was real, not a performance for the chandeliers. Her shoulders shook, but I could feel the resolute beat of her heart. I held her for a few seconds, then let go. We'll fix this with the truth. As amended in the Word, afterward I sent the entire package to Marcus with a short note, let them read what the judge will. That afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across my desk, I sat with a cup of black tea and reviewed the timeline again. The bankruptcy was filed on June 25th, the LOI was sent on July 2nd, the leveraged public goodwill email on July 3rd, the fraudulent PSA on July 5th, the credit card statement on July 6th, and the wedding, the climax of the performance on July 7th. The timeline was a tightly woven cord, with no slack. As evening fell, an automated email appeared in my inbox. Your IC3 complaint has been received. A special agent may contact you. I read it slowly and exhaled. There were no handcuffs, no flashing blue lights, just silence and the case file number. I closed my laptop and wrote one last sentence in my notebook. I once thought honor couldn't be forged, but someone tried. The only response is to let better paperwork have the final word. After 4 due, outside, the wind blew in from the bay. I sat in the quiet, knowing the battle would no longer be fought in the applause of a crowd, but in the pages of documents laid before a judge. And this time, the truth would be holding the microphone. 8:58 a.m. 3 knocks on the door, as firm as a gavel on wood. I set my coffee cup down, the spoon making a small, definitive clink against the ceramic, a period at the end of the morning sentence. I walked to the door and took a breath. 8:59. The door remained closed, a figure blurred behind the frosted glass. At 9 a.m. sharp, I turned the lock. A metal badge flashed before my eyes, and a deep voice read with precision, FBI, search warrant. Justice, this time, didn't arrive with promises. It arrived with paperwork and signatures. Justice, this time, wore badges and carried forms. The lead agent handed me the warrant, each word on the page like a step, the address of the house, the scope of the search, the items to be seized. The last page bore a judge's bold signature and the time of issuance. I nodded, offering no resistance. I knew the protocol. A search warrant isn't an arrest. It's a door to the door. Emma stood behind me, her hands clenched in the hem of her sweater. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pale. She flinched for a moment but didn't step back. I turned my head and whispered, "We remain calm. We answer what they ask. We provide exactly what is requested. Nothing more." I emmed. The agents entered, moving with the quiet confidence of people who already knew the layout of the house. The bookshelves, the desk, the file drawers. One agent opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of FD 597 forms received for property received, divided by returned, divided by released. Cameras flashed, the clicks echoing in the silent room. Cameras clicked like small verdicts. They asked for my computer. I powered it down myself and handed it over. They requested the external hard drives. I pointed to the correct drawer, removed them, and placed them neatly on a white cloth. I offered no extra explanation, just my signature on the receipt. Silence is leverage when the file is thick. A female agent invited Emma to the dining table, which had been temporarily repurposed as a processing station. She explained each item on the form. "We'll log everything individually. Please verify and then sign." Emma nodded, her hand trembling slightly. Her signature shook, her courage didn't. I handed over the envelope of documents I had prepared, the printout of USBC EDVA 23210894, detailing the $47.2 million debt, the statement AFCC00933321, showing the $99,830 honeymoon charge billed to me, the Oak Ridge PSA V2 with its forged proof of funds, the leveraged public goodwill email excerpt, the Napa IP login records. I said, simply, "These are copies. The checksum is on the cover page." The agent nodded, sealed the documents in a clear evidence bag, and read the exhibit number aloud for the record. 9:17 a.m. The wall clock ticked. I heard the scratch of pens on paper. Emma was invited to the living room for an interview. They turned on a recorder, the agent reading clearly. "Are you answering these questions voluntarily? You may stop at any time," Emma whispered. "Yes." I looked at her and gave a single nod. "Miss Mitchell, who created the RM billing profile with Aurelia Travel?" "Derek," she whispered. "He said he was using a corporate account for the discount." "Who sent the file, proof of funds, RM PDF?" "I found it in a shared folder. The original file was named POF RM Edit AI." "Did you ever sign the name R. Mitchell on any document?" "No, I didn't. I didn't know forgery was such a serious crime until we just need the facts. Thank you." Quite might do. Each question landed like a hammer blow, but her answers were clean. I knew that anything less than the truth would not hold up in the official record. 10:03 a.m. The doorbell rang again. Marcus, my lawyer, walked in, wearing a gray suit and carrying a firm leather briefcase. He shook hands with the lead agent, then turned to me. "We need your affidavit." We sat at the table. Marcus read each paragraph aloud. The timeline of my discovery, the method of legally obtaining copies from Emma's own account, a statement affirming I had not engaged in unauthorized access, and a declaration that everything was true to the best of my knowledge. I signed. Marcus notarized it. The fresh ink smelled faintly of resolution. Justice, this time, came in forms and signatures, not speeches. 11:20 a.m. They had finished cataloging everything: the laptop, 2 phones, the hard drives, the folder of documents, a USB drive. Emma signed each line item and received a copy of the receipt. The agent instructed, "We will notify you of our decision to retain or return the items." Then they left, leaving behind a business card with a name and a case number. The door closed, and the house was suddenly empty of voices, filled only by the steady hum of the refrigerator kicking back on. Marcus opened another file. Petition for annulment. Fraud. He explained it slowly and clearly. An annulment based on fraud means the marriage is treated as if it never existed because the initial consent was based on false information. Emma bit her lip, then took the pen and signed. Her hand shook less this time. Marcus closed the file. "I'll file this today, along with the motion to freeze the assets." We stepped out onto the porch. A few neighbors had gathered. Mrs. Gable's curtain hiccuped as the badges flashed. A reporter pointed a microphone at me. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have any comment on the allegations?" I looked directly at the camera and gave a single answer. "The documents are with the authorities." Then silence. I repeated it when they pressed for more. Nothing else. I didn't give statements to the press. I gave documents to the people who count. Emma sat down on the steps, holding a glass of water. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if Derek blames everything on me?" Marcus answered firmly, "You've cooperated fully. You're a victim of identity theft. Let the record speak for you." We went back inside. The house felt empty but clean. I opened my backup laptop and sent an email to my company's board. There have been no cash commitments made outside of the approved resolution. All relevant documentation has been turned over to the proper authorities. I attached a scan of the FD 597 and my affidavit. Concise, no commentary. Later that afternoon, an email confirmation arrived from the court. The petition for annulment had been received. Case number assigned. I forwarded it to Emma. "This is your legal door out." She replied with a thumbs up emoji, few words, but enough. As night fell, I walked down the street, the wind from the bay carrying the cold smell of salt. The neighbors' windows were lit, and I could almost hear the whispers rippling through the neighborhood. They were learning 3 new words today: warrant, affidavit, annulment. I went home, locked the door, and wrote in my notebook. 9 a.m. The gears of justice began to turn, not with applause, with a receipt. 6 months later, the air in the city had changed, and so had I. Looking back, that period feels like a long sequence of days marked by red ink stamps, blue signatures, and hours-long meetings. It all began with Derek's sentencing. He appeared in a tailored gray suit that hung loosely on a frame that had grown noticeably thinner. His once arrogant expression had folded inward, his eyes dropping every time the judge uttered the words wire fraud and identity theft. His lawyer would whisper in his ear, and Derek would just nod, lips pressed together, as if he had rehearsed every motion. The sentence was delivered: 18 months in a federal facility, along with a restitution order to repay a portion of the damages. No one in the courtroom clapped. No one wept. It all unfolded with the methodical and cold finality of a single, clean paper cut. I sat perfectly still, feeling my own heart beat steadily, no faster, no slower. I felt no satisfaction, nor did I feel pity. I only knew that justice, this time, had not been obscured by empty promises. Emma sat beside me, her hand trembling slightly, but her eyes were clear. She no longer looked at Derek as a lover, but as a name on a docket. I heard her whisper, so softly I almost missed it. "It's over." I placed my hand on hers and said nothing, just gave a slight nod. Shortly after, the Napa estate, the piece of land once promised as an oasis of happiness, was put up for public auction. I stood at the back of the room, watching strangers raise their paddles, the price climbing with the rhythm of a hammer striking at the past. When the auctioneer brought the gavel down with a final, sharp "sold," it felt like a door slamming shut on the illusions that had once been painted there. I let out a long breath, not of regret, but of resolution. It was time to pay the debts that others had left behind. I remember the lie I had told myself. We were selling the grapes to pay for an illusion and keeping only the soil to plant the truth. Life afterward grew quiet, but it was not empty. Emma asked to meet me at the old cafe, the same place where she had once refused the stock portfolio. This time, she arrived early. 2 hot espressos were already on the table. When I sat down, she pushed a folder toward me. It contained no demands, no coercive contracts. It was filled with her lessons, with small business plans she had written after spending 6 months back in school, studying administration, accounting, and corporate law. She started with the small numbers, balancing a budget, how to run payroll, how to calculate cash flow. Her voice was unsteady, but her gaze was firm. She no longer spoke in vague slogans, but in data and reality. I listened in silence, a profound stillness settling over me. When she finished, I took another folder from my briefcase, the share transfer agreement. I pushed it toward her and opened it to the first page, which detailed the transfer of 51% of the company into her name. But I didn't sign it yet. I placed another document beside it, a 12-month mentorship plan, accompanied by a board resolution outlining oversight and the clawback clause in case of breach. I looked her directly in the eye and asked, "Why do you think you've earned this?" Emma held her breath for a few seconds, then answered, "Because I chose the truth, even when that truth cost me everything." Her answer was not poetic, and there were no tears. But it was enough. I picked up the pen, signed my name, and handed it to her. 51% isn't a gift, I said slowly. It's a syllabus. Starting today, your real education begins. The light from the cafe window spilled onto the wooden table, illuminating my daughter's hands as they trembled, holding the paper. She smiled. Not a radiant smile, but a quiet, peaceful one. I felt as if I had just laid a solid brick back into a foundation that had cracked. Forgiveness, I realized, is not the act of deleting a record, but of filing it correctly. The mistakes, the losses, they were all still there, but now they serve not as a burden, but as reference documents, reminders for the new path ahead. Derek was in prison, paying the price for his choices. The NEPA property had been sold to cover his debts. And Emma, she had chosen to go back to school, to start over, and today she had chosen the truth. I was closing my story not with applause or with promises, but with a firm signature and a direct gaze. The legacy I had built was not about money. It was about honor. I had told Emma, the legacy I built is honor. You once chose a different path. Now live with the one you've chosen. And if you truly want it, learn how to rebuild it with the truth. And that, I left the cafe, a cool winter breeze brushing past my shoulders, leaving a rare sense of peace. There was no anger, no regret. There was only the quiet order of things that have been entered into the record. And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I had closed an old door to open a new one, a door through which honor was not only preserved, but passed on. I'm guessing 99% of you will get this far, sigh, and just keep scrolling without hitting like or subscribe, even though it only takes a second. What time is it where you are, and where are you listening from?